Please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, for you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. When she was about 14 years old, my sister experienced a concussion while playing basketball in the gym at school one day. She had been hit in the back of the head by a ball as one student was attempting to pass the ball to another. Like most kids her age, she didn't think anything about it at the time. She finished the day and got on the bus and came home, but by the time she got home, she had a terrible headache and wanted nothing more than to go to bed and sleep. Now, conventional wisdom has changed since those days, but back then, doctors warned parents never to let a child with a head injury go to sleep without first being examined by a doctor. My mother, hearing the story of my sister's injury, made clear that she was not to go to sleep, and I was charged with keeping my sister awake as we headed to the hospital some 45 minutes from our farm. My mother insisted that I sit in the back seat of our SUV with my sister and watch her to make sure that she didn't fall asleep or get worse on the way. I can't think of a better job for a 12-year-old brother than to keep his sister awake. As we started off to the hospital, I kept looking over at my sister and asking, "Are you sleeping?" And she responded, "No." I must have asked that question 100 times on that drive. Once I did look over and her eyes were closed, and I became agitated, thinking she might have gone to sleep. "Hello, are you asleep?" She turned to me and without opening her eyes replied, "No, I'm just resting my eyes." By the time we got to the hospital, I think I was tired of asking that question, and I'm sure my sister was absolutely tired of answering it. Fortunately, the medical exam confirmed that my sister only had a mild concussion. After some medication to help with her headache, the doctor told my sister she could go home. "Does that mean I can finally sleep?" she asked. "Of course," the doctor replied. My sister then looked over at my mother and me and said, "I'm going to sleep on the way home, so if you need to ask if I'm asleep, just so you know, the answer then will be yes." That humorous moment came back to me this week as I was reading the gospel text and thinking about John's message. John the Baptist came on the scene in first century Palestine at a time when the people of that place had simply accepted the norm of Roman occupation and the crushing weight of economic and social injustice that came with it. The people of Israel had been under the rule of foreign powers for centuries, with only the tiniest blip of freedom under the Hasmoneans several centuries before John's ministry. Every few years, a charismatic figure would arrive on the scene, promising to lead a rebellion from Rome to free them and to let them go from the status quo, finally assuring them of freedom and justice. And each and every time those leaders met their ends at the hand of Roman officers determined, above all, to keep the peace. There would be no challenge to the emperor's power. It's really easy to give up when you see every attempt to throw off the shackles of occupation and oppression met with some overwhelming force so as to destroy any sense of hope. There would be no alleviation of the poverty and exploitation experienced at the hands of Rome. Religious leaders among the people recognized this and, together with the wealthiest among the people, conspired with Rome. They sought to aid Rome in keeping the peace and in the process ensure their own prosperity and privilege. So the people of Palestine were lulled into a quiet resignation that the difficult life they lived was the only option. And then, almost out of nowhere, comes the strident voice of John the Baptist, naming the injustice and the oppression and calling out the leaders who not only allowed it to happen, but whose complicity made it worse. John pointedly challenged the status quo and those who benefited from it. He urged them to change their hearts and their lives by embracing the teachings of the prophets, wisdom that demanded that they put the needs of others ahead of their own. John called the people to a different way of life, one that could finally bring liberation and hope through the decisions and actions of each individual person. In essence, John's words are a wake up call for the people. They're a jarring clap meant to stir them from their slumber and arouse them to a new way of being. God is at work in the world, and everyone has the ability to share in that work, but it requires being awake and alert, ready to recognize the way and will of God in those who come among us. Thus, John points to Jesus, the one who is to come. John may have no idea who this coming Messiah will be, but he knows there is a leader coming who will bring true freedom and lasting peace to the people. That's why he's keeping his eyes open and doing whatever he can to ready the people to recognize the one sent by God. How can anyone embrace full and abundant life if they don't know what it actually looks like? That's what John does. Those words echo the challenge heard hundreds of years before John in the words from Isaiah's prophecy. To a people languishing under the weight of despair, overcome by the decline and decimation of their nation, left spiritually exhausted, the prophet's words encourage them to be the hope for which they have longed. God has neither abandoned them nor forgotten them. God is at work among them, even in the midst of their struggles and suffering. The prophet reminds them to be ready for the way of God, to ready the way for God, the one who will be revealed by living with justice now. In doing so, they will be able to recognize God at work, and they will be prepared to join God at work in the healing of the world. The words from 2 Peter offered a similar encouragement to early Christians. The author encouraged them to be alert and watching for the presence of God in every circumstance, and ready to embody the reign and rule of God in their lives even then. There's an old French lullaby that I've grown to love through the years. It's called Frère Jacques, or Brother John, but it comes into English as, "Are you sleeping?" The words are simple. Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping? Brother John, morning bells are ringing, morning bells are ringing, ding dang dong, ding dang dong. It's the story of a monk who almost oversleeps and comes close to missing morning prayers, but fortunately the bells wake him from slumber. Maybe we've been a bit like Brother John over the last 9 months. These seemingly endless weeks of isolation filled with so much heartache and uncertainty have left many of us numb, emotionally and spiritually. It's been hard to see God at work in the world. It's felt like we've been trapped in one long nightmare, unable to wake up from it. That's made it difficult to see the ways in which God is active and involved in our world. The words of John the Baptist come as an alarm for us, rousing us from our slumber and awakening us to the presence of God in our world and in our daily lives. That awakening happened for me on Thanksgiving Day when I did a video call with my sister and brother-in-law. We planned our meals to be ready at the same time, and then we sat eating and talking to each other for several hours. When we were finished eating, we ended up playing several virtual card games together, still connected by video chat. We laughed, we cried, we told stories of past holidays together, and we prayed together, giving thanks for the technology that allowed us to be together across the miles. I'm honestly ashamed to admit to you that that was the first time we'd done anything like that together. Yes, we talked on the phone and we text regularly and we've done brief video calls, but we've never actually shared a meal and fun together virtually. I was moved to tears when my sister said, "We have to do this regularly. I only wish we'd done it while mom and dad were still alive." Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping? Morning bells are ringing. Morning bells are ringing. May we wake up to the reality of God's presence in our lives this holy season. Amen.